CSS nesting has been supported in all major browsers for 2 years now. Yeah, 2 years, which means it's finally safe to use in real projects. Back then, I mostly ignored it because I was already using Sass for nesting. The syntax was still a bit too restrictive, and support for older browser versions was still a concern. I'm sure we've all been guilty of lagging behind on updates. So, anyways, I slapped a reminder on my calendar for future me to come back to, and future me is here. So let's dive in and explore it together. All right, let's have a look at a basic example here. We have a preview card, and within that we have an image. Underneath that we have a body that contains a heading, a paragraph, and a link. If we look at the corresponding HTML, you could see article with a class of preview card, and within that we have the image, the body, and within that we have the heading, the paragraph, and the link. Let's scroll down and you could see the CSS. And this is the classic syntax. As you can see, it's pretty repetitive, which is what CSS nesting aims to improve upon. So we don't need all this repetition, and it could actually make it harder to read. And you might be tempted to remove a couple of these classes. Maybe you don't technically need them, but at the same time, now it's harder to tell that this P and A elements are children of the PC body element. They actually look like siblings right now. So let's get rid of that. Now, there was a tool called Sass. Well, there still is a tool called Sass. It still exists. And it was introduced years ago and solved this issue by introducing nesting. But that required a build step and just a little bit of extra setup. And now it's actually directly in CSS. So you can use it today. If we go to the website caniuse.com, you'll see that the feature is supported in all major browsers. So that includes Chrome, Edge, Safari, and Firefox. The green boxes not only mean that the feature is supported, but so is the relaxed syntax, which we'll touch more on later. One interesting thing that I noticed when making this video is that Chrome for Android and Firefox for Android show only the latest version. And apparently that's because each version is a little bit too tricky to test. So they only list the latest one. But if you go to Wayback Machine, you'll see that all the way back in January of 2024, they had support in those Android browsers. All right, if we have a look back at our example again, I can show you how this classic CSS can be rewritten using the new nesting syntax. So I have some pre-written code here, which shows the newer nested syntax. And as you can see, we're not repeating these elements over and over again. We just have article.previewCard written once, and it sort of looks like HTML. It probably looks a little bit familiar. Now I'm going to open the same file on both sides. We're going to go back up to the HTML, and now we can see a side-by-side comparison. You can see that both sides, it starts with the article.preview card, and then you indent, and within that you can see the image and PC body, and then we indent one level further and we can see the P and A tags, which directly correspond with the HTML. And just to prove that the nested CSS works in the exact same way as the classic syntax, what we can do is comment out both styling groupings. And then we'll go back to the browser and view the output. So you can see we don't have that styling in there right now for the preview card. Now we're going to come back over here and uncomment the nested portion. And I'm going to close this. We don't need it open on both sides anymore. So I just saved it, and switching back, we can see that it's working and it looks exactly how it did before, but now we're using the newer nested syntax. For those of you who have already been using Sass, this may look familiar as nesting was one of the biggest selling points of Sass for me and many others. But with CSS nesting, we no longer need a build step to get this functionality. That said, Sass still has a lot of value with its other powerful features. If you need features such as mix-ins, modules, private comments, custom functions, or loops, you may still want to use Sass for those projects. But it's pretty cool that one of the main features of Sass is now available natively in CSS. Now I want to talk about the ampersand and how it's used in nesting. The ampersand is basically a substitute for the parent. So if you've seen tutorials from over 2 years ago, it used to be required that you'd have the ampersand before the element. So each one of these elements would have to have the ampersand before it, and that references article.preview.card, but they've updated it since then, so you no longer need to do that. However, there are still some other cases where you may want to use the ampersand. One example would be using the ampersand for pseudo classes and elements. So here we have an example with the ampersand on the hover and also down here. So remember, this is a substitute. So it's like the equivalent of saying a colon hover. And let's just paste in this comment. Yeah, so it would also be used for focus, before, not, and nth child. And just to show you that it works, I'm going to save it again, and we'll go over to the output, and you could see, the button lights up, and there's a hover effect behind the card itself. You may also want to use it to chain modifiers to selectors. So this could be really useful with things like warning messages and success messages. So here's an example written in classic CSS. And as you can see, we could reduce the repetition and only write span.message once. So once again, just picture the ampersand representing the parent. There is also a reverse nesting technique that you could do, although this is less common. So in this case, we have the classic CSS up top, and we have all list items as black. But if the parent is .menu, then we make it white. So below we have the nested CSS, and you could see we actually have the ampersand after menu. So imagine the list item in place of the ampersand, and so that would be the exception. If menu is the parent, we make that white. If you consider yourself a CSS connoisseur, you might be wondering how to write combinators and if the ampersand is necessary. Well, the answer is no, you don't need the ampersand. You can simply write it out like so. Regarding @rules, MDN clearly lays out which @rules can be nested. We have media, supports, layer, scope, container, and starting style. I suppose it wouldn't make sense for some @rules like keyframes and font face to be nested. Since media is the most common @rule, I'll show an example of that. Let's say we want the link to be green when the screen is less than 1,000 pixels. So I'm going to type that out, get the @rule set up, and then there's actually two different ways we could do this. So I can write the A element out, and then we're going to just make this green. Okay, so that's one way. Alternatively, we can copy and paste this within the A link, and I'll tab it in. And then we actually don't need to specify the element. So this should work as well. And I'm going to save that. And then we'll open up our example, and we're going to reduce the size down to less than 1,000 pixels. And you can see it turns green, from green to purple. Now I want to talk about some caveats and limitations with CSS nesting. One of the biggest issues is overnesting. If you end up with selectors like this, that may be a problem. At that level of specificity, your styles become very fragile. A small markup change can break everything. Some people like to just keep it to a few levels, or you could keep it to a section or a component, and that's my preference. You'd also want to avoid nesting if you need to support older browsers. Now, it's been over 2 years, so that's a pretty rare situation, but you may need to support a legacy enterprise system or something. Lastly, if you're used to using Sass with BEM syntax, that's not going to work in CSS nesting. But if this double underscore syntax doesn't look familiar to you, you probably don't need to worry about it. So will I be using CSS nesting? I'm sure I will situationally. I still like Sass for having those extra powerful features, so I'll continue using that tool as well, especially if the project already has a build step. But I'm sure nesting will come in handy for small projects, prototyping, using within the style tag in HTML files, and software that allows you to add custom CSS. But I'm curious if you'll be using it or if you've already started using it. If you have any thoughts on it, tips, or advice, feel free to share in the comments. And be sure to check out this video's description section for useful resources shown in the video. We may or may not be releasing more occasional videos ranging from graphic design to web development to WebXR. So if you want to find out whether we actually do, consider subscribing. And thanks for watching.